Many people expect weakness to arrive with pain. They expect an injury, a diagnosis, a sudden change that clearly announces itself. But weakness in the legs rarely works that way. For many adults over 60, it begins quietly, not with pain, not with a dramatic event, but with small changes that seem easy to dismiss. A little more effort when standing up, a little less confidence on stairs, a slightly slower walking pace. Small differences that appear so gradually that most people never notice them happening. Until one day something feels different. A distance that once felt easy now feels longer. A staircase suddenly seems more demanding. A simple movement requires more effort than it used to. And that's when many people start asking the wrong question. They ask, is this just age? But in many cases, the real question should be, what changed before I noticed the weakness? Because weak legs rarely appear overnight. Most of the time, they are the final result of changes that have been developing silently for years. Today, we're going to explore some of those changes. And more importantly, we're going to look at the warning signs that many people miss until mobility, balance, and independence begin to suffer. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video. By doing that, you help YouTube recommend this content to other people interested in healthy aging, mobility, independence, and quality of life after 60. Let's begin with one of the earliest signs. Difficulty standing up from a chair. And this is where many people first notice that something has changed. Most people don't think about standing up. It's something they've done thousands of times throughout their lives, which is exactly why it becomes such an important signal. When a movement is completely automatic, even small changes become meaningful. At first, it may take a little more effort to get up. Maybe you begin using the armrests. Maybe you lean forward more than before. Maybe you push off with your hands without even realizing it. None of these changes seem significant on their own. In fact, most people barely notice them. But over time, these small adjustments become part of the routine. The body begins finding ways to compensate. Not because it wants to, but because it needs to. Standing up from a chair relies heavily on the muscles of the thighs, hips, and lower body. When those muscles gradually lose strength, the body starts recruiting help from other areas. And that's often the first clue that something is changing beneath the surface. This doesn't automatically mean there's a serious problem, but it may be one of the earliest signs that leg strength isn't what it used to be. And when this change continues unnoticed, another activity often begins to feel different, not inside the house, but between floors. Stairs start feeling more difficult, and that's where the next warning sign appears. There's a reason why stairs reveal weakness so quickly. Unlike walking on flat ground, every step upward forces the legs to lift the entire body against gravity. That requires strength, balance, and coordination, which means even small losses in muscle function become much easier to notice. At first, the difference may be subtle. You hold the handrail more often. You climb more slowly. You pause halfway up. You tell yourself you're simply being careful, and maybe that's true, but it's also possible that your body is asking for more support than it once needed. The challenge is that people adapt extremely well. They change habits without realizing it. They avoid certain activities. They take elevators more often. They choose the easier route. And because those adjustments happen gradually, weakness remains hidden. Until one day the effort becomes impossible to ignore. And when strength begins to decline, another silent change often follows. Walking speed starts changing. Not dramatically, just enough to matter. And that's where we go next. walking more slowly without realizing it. One of the most overlooked changes after 60 has nothing to do with pain. In fact, many people never notice it themselves. They simply begin walking a little slower, not overnight, not from one week to the next, but little by little. A shorter stride, a more cautious pace, a few extra seconds to cover the same distance. Because the change happens gradually, it often goes unnoticed until someone else points it out. A spouse, a friend, a family member, or perhaps a situation where keeping up with others suddenly feels more difficult than it used to. What's interesting is that walking speed is often connected to much more than movement alone. It reflects strength, balance, confidence, and the body's ability to respond efficiently to everyday demands. When leg strength begins to decline, the body naturally becomes more conservative. Movements become smaller, steps become more careful, and walking begins requiring more attention than before. The person may not feel weak. They may simply feel slower. But sometimes, slower is the first visible sign that the body is working harder behind the scenes. And as confidence in movement decreases, another change often begins to appear, not in speed, but in stability. Loss of balance and confidence. And this is where many people start changing their behavior without even realizing it. Most people think balance is something they either have or don't have. But balance is actually a skill that depends on many systems working together. Muscles, joints, vision, coordination, and the ability of the body to react quickly to changes around it. When leg strength begins to decline, balance often becomes less reliable. Not necessarily enough to cause a fall, but enough to create hesitation. And hesitation changes behavior. Some people become more careful on uneven ground. Others avoid certain activities. Some stop walking in unfamiliar places, and many begin paying closer attention to every step they take. At first, these adjustments seem reasonable, but over time, they can quietly reduce activity levels. The person moves less, walks less, explores less, not because they want to, but because their confidence is slowly changing. And this creates a cycle that many adults never see coming. Less confidence often leads to less movement, and less movement can gradually lead to even greater weakness. Which brings us to one of the most important hidden factors behind weak legs after 60. Less movement creates more weakness, and this cycle may be affecting more people than most realize. Many people assume weakness causes inactivity, but sometimes inactivity is what accelerates weakness. The body is remarkably efficient. If a muscle is used regularly, the body works to maintain it. But if that muscle is used less and less over time, the body begins adapting, and not always in a helpful way. The muscles become less active. Strength gradually decreases. Endurance starts fading, and movements that once felt effortless begin requiring more energy. The challenge is that this process is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly, month after month, year after year, which is why so many people don't notice how much their routine has changed. A few less walks, a few more hours sitting, a few activities removed from the schedule. None of them seem important individually, but together they can slowly influence strength, mobility, and independence, and the body responds accordingly. The less movement it receives, the less prepared it becomes for movement. This is one reason why weakness often feels as though it appears suddenly. In reality, the process may have been developing for years, but if inactivity is only part of the story, what is the deeper reason behind all of this? Why does weakness seem to become more common after 60? To answer that, we need to look at what is happening beneath the surface. The hidden reason behind weak legs. Because age alone is rarely the complete explanation. Many people blame age for everything, and while aging certainly affects the body, it does not tell the entire story. The real explanation is usually a combination of factors working together over time. One of the most important is the gradual loss of muscle mass. This process develops slowly, often over decades. And because it happens so gradually, most people never notice it happening until strength starts affecting everyday activities. The muscles of the legs carry a unique responsibility. They support the body's weight, help maintain balance, allow movement, and contribute to independence in countless daily tasks, which means that even small changes can become noticeable over time. But muscle changes are only one piece of the puzzle. Daily movement matters. Sleep quality matters. Nutrition matters. Balance matters. Confidence matters. And all of these factors influence how well the body maintains strength throughout the years. This helps explain why two people of the same age can have completely different levels of mobility. One person may continue walking comfortably. Another may struggle with activities that once felt simple. The difference is not always age itself. Often, it is the accumulation of habits, routines, and physical changes that have developed over time. And this is exactly why paying attention to early signs can be so valuable. Because weakness rarely begins when the problem becomes obvious. It usually begins much earlier, long before mobility is noticeably affected. And before we finish, there is one final thought worth remembering. Because understanding the signs is only part of the picture. When people think about losing strength, they often imagine a sudden change, a clear moment when everything becomes different, but that is rarely how the body works. Most physical changes develop gradually, quietly, almost invisibly. A little less strength, a little less confidence, a little less movement, until one day the difference becomes impossible to ignore. That is why awareness matters. Not because every change is a reason to worry, but because understanding what the body is doing allows us to pay attention before limitations become larger, especially when it comes to mobility. Because mobility affects far more than movement. It influences independence, confidence, freedom, and quality of life. It's also important to remember that every person is different. Different routines, different lifestyles, different health histories, which is why the information shared in this video is intended for educational and awareness purposes only. This content is not medical advice and does not replace professional evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. If ongoing weakness, balance problems, or mobility changes are affecting your daily life, speaking with a qualified healthcare professional may help you better understand your individual situation. For those interested in learning more about mobility support, healthy aging, joint health, and wellness resources, I've included additional information in the description and pinned comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel and join us for future discussions about the hidden changes that often affect health after 60. Because sometimes the most important health signals are not the loudest ones. They're the subtle changes we almost overlook. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.